Heidi, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yes, my name is Heidi Chance, and I am a retired human trafficking detective from Phoenix Police Department. I actually spent 25 years there, and the better half of my career, almost 14 years, I was an undercover working sex trafficking on the streets and online for the police department, and had a wonderful time doing all of that. And I recently retired in October, and so now I am doing my own business and spreading and sharing awareness about sex trafficking to the public through the means of, my website, my social media accounts, but also specifically training for law enforcement because I have a lot of experience doing undercover operations for so long. Um, and I think if we can get more law enforcement excited about proactive operations, we can do a better job of targeting the true parts of this problem that we need to target, which are the sex buyers and the traffickers.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, congratulations on your somewhat
Yeah.
recent retirement. Take us back just a little bit. What led you to a career in law enforcement?
So it's actually in my blood. My grandfather was NYPD,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
then my own father was Phoenix PD also. And so actually, when I graduated in 99 at the police academy, my dad had written the police chief a special letter to give his badge to me as my badge. And so that
That
badge
is awesome.
got, well, he did 26 years, I did 25 years. So that badge has got a lot of time on of use. Yeah.
That's very cool. That is very cool. So, I've talked to a lot of folks about human trafficking, but I've never talked to somebody who has done this from the point of view of being undercover. How did you get into doing the undercover work, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something important that most people don't hear from law enforcement because we are, always so, deep cover or secret this and secret that. But definitely, I was a school resource officer. Just after my patrol time, I had my son and I moved positions so that I could have a better schedule. And I stayed at the school for 6 years. Time flies when you're having fun. And every day, we didn't get to take our patrol cars home, so we would return the keys in the car to the precinct. And I remember walking into the police station and I saw this girl that I knew when she was in sixth or seventh grade, and here she is, still a juvenile, but a little bit older. And she was in the juvenile holding area in trouble. And I kind of stopped. She recognized me. I recognized her. I'm like, why are you in trouble? And we had a conversation about the fact that she was prostituting for her boyfriend. And, I had already been a cop for, 7 years, 8 years already. And I knew prostitution was against the law. The area I worked patrol, we didn't really have a lot of that going on except for near the hotels.
Hmm.
But I just had like a mind blow of, wow, this really, and this is back in like 2004, this happens to juveniles. And
Yeah.
that was new for me. It was new for Phoenix Police Department. Ironically, there was a high profile case that I think the juvenile and her mother even did an interview with Dr. Phil. But basically, it was where this juvenile met a 18 and 19-year-old male and female at a park that basically held her in their apartment in a dog crate and had men come and have sex with her in the dog crate. And so that incident, in combination with my own experience with that juvenile, kind of sparked my interest in doing temporary assignments, shadows, and eventually testing for a position as an undercover in the unit back then was called VICE. It is
Right.
now called the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit, but that is where my undercover interests began. And, I'm very proud of my career and all the things I've done. I mean, as an undercover, I've put traffickers away for hundreds of years, as well as a detective investigating and getting justice for victims. And, all of that is what I have to share. And I don't want it to be lost on, me sitting at home retired and not doing anything. So I'm doing something about it.
Very good. I've talked to a lot of people like yourself. They retire from the military, they retire for law enforcement, and they just can't sit at home. They're like, I just have to keep helping. I just have to keep going. So I appreciate people like you, and I appreciate what you're doing. I know that being in law enforcement is stressful enough, but did you find that there was an added stress doing your undercover work?
Yeah, and it's definitely something that there's different dynamics. You have sex buyers that are soliciting you out on the streets because I would pose as a prostitute
Right.
walking the streets, and I'd watch sex buyers take their wedding rings off, put it in a cup holder, and then solicit me for, sex for money. And I've had situations doing that where I've had them try and touch me or grab a hold of me, and I'm standing outside of their car. So these are,
Sure.
semi-dangerous situations, some that failed to stop for patrol when they pulled them over after I gave the, signal that I had a deal with them. And then we've got felony flight and vehicle pursuits and people getting out of cars and running. And then hotel rooms, that's a little more intimate. That's a longer conversation. They are in the room with you. You are by yourself with them. Sometimes they're armed. They also try to touch you in the room. And it's a fine line. You definitely have to observe officer safety as well as get the job done.
Sure.
And then towards the end of my career, the last couple of years, we started engaging more with pimps. And so we had pimps show up to our hotel room, and that's definitely more dangerous, more dynamic. They bring other people, they're armed, they offer you drugs, all kinds of things. So it's definitely, high stress, but
Sure.
it's something that, needs to be done because we definitely evolved also with social media and all these platforms. And so I have 6 Facebooks, 3 Instagrams, tagged Meet Me, Bumble, Plenty of Fish, Twitter, Snapchat, all in
Hmm.
undercover personas. And I call it catfishing pimps. And basically, we would actually build cases where they would engage in recruitment and grooming tactics on us, not realizing who they're talking to, and then we could arrest them.
Okay.
So that's definitely something that I really enjoy doing because I've got pimps I've put in prison that have never seen my face.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's funny you talked about how you had this very visceral moment in 2004 looking eye to eye with somebody who had this problem, and you watched the rise of social media and how this predatory stuff was happening online to putting people away that have actually never seen your face before. What was it, the in-person stuff and the online stuff? Are there similarities? I know one is, obviously face to face, you can read nonverbal cues, things like that. And then online, is there like a typical pattern that you can notice? Is there something that you can share with us that says, hey, if my
Yes.
kids are having this conversation, what are the red flags they need to look for?
Yes. So part of the grooming that traffickers do is very confusing because as a person who's even a single adult who's on these dating sites, they're thinking that this individual is interested in them and their person. They're interested in them, but they're not interested in them for the reasons you think, like a
Right.
relationship. They're
Right.
interested in finding out everything they can about you, where your parents work, what cars they drive, where your siblings go to school, how old are they, where's your house, all of those things so that they can use that information against you later on when they have you. And so that's where, those initial things when we have parents that are finding these conversations going on with strangers, stranger dangers still happening online, looking at them asking questions, looking at them saying, delete these messages after you
Hmm.
read this, or let me know if your mom enters the room, or sometimes they text in codes and they teach the kids certain codes or messages or emojis to send to indicate that a parent walked in. All those things are absolutely going to be red flags.
Okay.
And parents need to act on that. And there's ways to act on that. There's the cyber tip line. There's the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and you can possibly put that, attached to this interview. But also local law enforcement, because as a detective, we would receive information from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, from Polaris, from our own hotline here in Arizona, Silent Witness. We had a Vice hotline, but all of those entities and ways to report are wonderful However, there's a delay of that information getting to the actual person that's going to work these complaints, which is the local PD. So, contacting local law enforcement is always best, but if you don't want a patrol car showing up at your house, you
Sure.
can, obviously use those other means.
Got it. And that's good because some people don't want the patrol car showing up. They
Yeah.
want to handle this privately as a family with law enforcement. That's great point, by the way. Great
Mhm.
point. So when you were talking a little bit about the red flags in the conversation, I kind of felt like there was an overlap between human trafficking and sextortion. Is that something that you have found in your work?
Yeah. And so that's definitely where, when law enforcement responds, they can determine what crime actually occurred.
Hmm.
Not the parent's job to worry about that part. If a person is asking them to send images of themselves, those kind of things are more towards the sextortion. The whole human trafficking part would be luring them away to travel with them, to go to Miami, Vegas, get their hair done, their nails done, but you have to, perform sex acts and make money, and they give money over to the trafficker. So that's definitely a different crime than sextortion, but they do get kind of intermingled a little bit. But there are states that are actually creating statutes specifically for sextortion, and you can look those things up. All of that is public record. You can look up what is the sextortion state law in my state.
Hmm.
And so, those are all things that parents can do to be more informed about, the differences between the two. But either way, report to law enforcement.
Right. Very good. And one of the things that I've kind of picked up in you talking about is, and especially talking about your first encounter in this, a lot of people tend to think that a human trafficking victim looks one way or only acts one way, is only found in one place. But that's not really the case, is it? This is something that has spread to many different environments in American culture, right?
Yes, that's definitely a common question I get when I travel around speaking, because I speak to community organizations, hospitals, law enforcement, the whole gambit. And, I've actually had people ask me, what does a sex trafficking victim look like? And it isn't a certain demographic, it isn't a certain race, it isn't even a certain age, it isn't just females, it's also males. Those are all things that are going on with victims. But I have a whole list on my website of indicators, but there's some unique things specific to trafficking, like branding, for instance.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
a trafficker um, is wanting to show ownership of the victims that they control or that they exploit, they will put their moniker or their symbol or their name tattooed on these people, on these multiple victims. So if you have, you walk into a Circle K, let's say you're getting gas and you're
Hmm.
in line behind, three individuals, a male and three females, let's say, just for, reference sake, and they
Sure.
all have the same tattoo, that should be a red flag. I mean, not necessarily that you have to call the police right then, but if you hear other things going on, you might hear the conversation where they're, told to give the pimp money, or it appears to be that they're in fear of this person, or if someone asks them a question and, they look to the trafficker to, say, can I answer this person? All of those things are huge red flags. So I have a whole list on my website.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that most people don't really understand is that this can affect everybody. And it doesn't mean that these people are, not savvy to what's going on in the world. These are just sometimes good-hearted people that get caught up in these really elaborate scams, right?
Yeah, and just like that reference the example I was just giving, if a person observes those things, don't feel bad about calling 911. That
Right.
is what 911 is for. But
Right.
also be safe about your observations, but try and get a little detail. Maybe break out your phone and covertly act like you're on the phone, but you're actually recording the person.
Hmm.
Um, get the license plate, be a good witness. Don't confront them. Certainly don't try
Right.
and talk to them. Don't say, I know what you are, or it appears to me that you're, trafficking these people. Let law enforcement do that. But definitely be a good witness and get as much details and info and descriptions of these people as you can for us so that we can find them.
Very cool. Very cool. So, what I find interesting is that you have kind of seen this evolution in human trafficking going from strictly face to face to being online now. What is your overall impression of how this has kind of changed over the last 20, 25 years? Has it gotten more aggressive? I feel like people know more about it, but has the actual uh, the crime of human trafficking changed all that much, or just do people understand it more because it's gotten more publicity?
So drug trafficking is number one as far
Right.
as a criminal organization in the United States and pretty much the world. Illegal arms trade is number two, and human trafficking is number two as well, tied with that.
Right.
There are gangsters and drug dealers that are realizing it's way more profitable to traffic a person 24/7, 365, but also they're realizing that they don't have to go get product.
Mm-hmm.
And if they get pulled over by the police, as long as they control the mouth of that victim in the car with them, they're not going to get caught for anything. Go ahead and search my car, officer. Go ahead and bring the canine. I don't have drugs here. They're not going to get caught for anything because they're controlling that other person. So it's definitely more prevalent in regards to that, but also everybody wants Instagram followers. Everybody thinks they're going to be Instagram famous, especially young teens. So their profiles are open to the public, and that is an open door to sex buyers,
Mm.
predators, pimps, all of the people that would be exploiting your children. And so open profiles are a huge mistake, and they are contributing to a lot of these kids getting lured away and involved in trafficking.
Right. I recently did an episode on how kidnapping works in 2023, and it used to be, when I was younger it was stranger danger, oh you were always going to get snatched off the street, that sort of thing. But now it starts online. This whole grooming process starts online. So what are some things that parents can do? Obviously, the open profiles, like you just said, is something that, we need to make sure our kids don't have. What are some other things that parents need to coach their kids on so that they don't find themselves being targeted by a trafficker?
So definitely, and it may even take a parent creating their own undercover account, because it's not necessarily their child trying to be deceptive,
Hmm.
but it is the encouragement of the bad guy, the predator, telling them, hey, create another profile that your parents don't know about. The idea came from them.
Hmm.
So definitely be monitoring consistently. Don't think that it's your child being deceptive, but make a backup social media account that you can friend them on in case they block you because this other person directed them to do so. But definitely put things in place. I don't know if you're aware of Bark Technologies or Gab
Hmm.
Wireless. Those two entities have amazing devices, Apple Watches, phones that, even I have parents, their 8-year-old is upset because everybody else in the class has a phone already and they
Yep.
don't get one. And this constant fight.
Right.
This is where parents can take those steps to give them a phone, but it's a phone that notifies you of when someone's trying to engage with them or solicit them for pictures and have these kind of conversations we're talking about over those devices. I think that's definitely huge. I have some tips that people can download on my website. Tips for parents, tips for teens. Like if teens have their friends that they're, worried about that has this new older boyfriend and they're not sure why they're, talking about running away and how to approach that conversation with your friends. I have those sheets down also on my website to download as a resource and something that, parents can refer back to as a guide if and when these things happen to their kids.
Very cool. So tell us a little bit about A Chance for Awareness.
So it is my a chanceforawareness.com is my website that I created when I retired. I created it twofold. One, for the purpose of community awareness. I created an online course that has 8 modules, and parents can take that course at their leisure. You can do it, in segments, and they can refer back to it. It is extensive. It talks about the evolution of law enforcement and how and I kind of went into that a little bit, and how we've changed and evolved. I mean, before, when I first started, we were just arresting prostitutes.
Hmm.
And now when we're trying to rescue victims, they've been told by their trafficker, the police are just going to put you in jail. and
Right.
they're not half wrong because that's what we were doing before. So we have a reputation to repair with victims. And anyway, it goes through victim vulnerability. I talk about sex buyers a lot in that instruction of training, and then traffickers. And then I go through how to get involved in the fight and help out. But also the other part of my business is law enforcement training. I'm traveling all over the United States as well as doing online courses. I just spoke at a school resource officer conference yesterday with 300 officers about trafficking, about investigating trafficking, about how to conduct a victim interview, interrogate a suspect, put a case together for successful prosecution. For me, I'm trying to get officers excited about these kind of cases because they're really hard cases to investigate. They are hard because we have usually a victim's word against a suspect's word. We're not going to have a witness. And we have to corroborate everything the victim's saying through DNA evidence, cell phones, computers, video surveillance, other witnesses, all kinds of other evidence to help tell the story. And, that's a lot of work. And then on
Yeah.
top of
Yeah.
that, once you rescue this person, they're leaning on you to help them get their ID back, find their birth certificate, get a job, get stable housing, all of those things. It's a big job, and I'm very proud of getting those services and getting victims actually out. But more officers need to get inspired to want to do all that heavy lifting and all that work to really fight this problem on top of all the undercover stuff.
Right.
So it's definitely you know it's intimidating to a lot of officers.
Sure.
They're responding from call to call to call, or if it's a small agency. I had a girl yesterday, I'm driving to work, I'm talking to her, she's in Minnesota. She has an interview today, her first interview, and she's like, I don't even know what to ask her. I've never been trained to interview a victim. So I sent her like a 13-page, these questions, if it pertains to what she's disclosing, ask these questions. And she's an officer that met me on Facebook. So it's definitely a hard job, but I appreciate when they reach out and, want to do a good job and get justice for victims.
Very cool. Now, before we wrap things up, we've talked
Yeah.
about, a whole lot of aspects here with human trafficking. Is there something that I didn't ask about? Is there something that you really want everybody to know about trafficking in order to be able to either spot this or to empower themselves, to help their kids? What's kind of a parting thought that you have for us?
Yeah. So I think, and this is where I've had lots of victims say they were in the open public at a city bus stop. There was 15 people around, and her pimp just beat her up in front of all these people, and no one called the police.
Yeah.
So I think it's a matter of, if you see or suspect something's happening, start helping everyone out, including that person it's happening to, by reporting it.
Right.
No one is going to do anything to you or say anything to you about reporting. And that is how these cases start. I mean, citizens reporting. And we've gone away from that, and we really need to get back to reporting suspicious act. Just like you hear in the airport, if you see a bag unattended, report it. We get that reminder as an announcement in the airport, but I don't think we get that reminder from the media or from, anywhere else. Maybe, obviously from here, a reminder to, if you see something, say something and report it, and know how and where to report it in your state.
Very good. Heidi, if somebody's interested in working with you or taking your courses, where can they find you online?
So I am on Instagram. It is A_chance_4_awareness. And then obviously my website, achanceforawareness.com. And then LinkedIn. I really like LinkedIn. So I definitely have a lot on LinkedIn as far as followers and people engaging with me, requesting me to come present and all of those things. So
Very good, Heidi. Thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it. I know you probably don't hear that enough, but from me and my audience, we appreciate you still doing this fight, even though that you're retired. Thank you, and God bless you.
you're very welcome, and thank you.